us from Chennai, and he will be talking about, does ocular blood flow change with glaucoma therapy? Dr. Murli.
Thank you so much, Dr. Charlie. And I think it's wonderful to be in this host of senior glaucoma specialists and people who deal with ocular blood flow. My respects to Professor Das and seniors, Dr. Professor Kirti Singh and others. And thanks to AOS for this opportunity to speak here. Does ocular blood flow change with glaucoma therapy? I think we all understand that normal tension glaucoma is an interplay of factors between IOP dependent and IOP independent factors. And the IOP dependent factors would predominate in a patient who has raised intraocular pressure and vice versa, and those the intraocular pressure is statistically normal. So these are pictures of a typical NTG patient, very classic NTG, as you know, we all recognize. And my workup on an NTG patient nowadays includes a complete glaucoma evaluation, excludes secondary causes like secondary intermittent angle closure, non-glaucomatous causes for pallor of the disc, and so on. And I would schedule a color Doppler imaging with an experienced radiologist who has been my partner in this for many years now. A physician consult to exclude factors like nocturnal hypertension. I think a lot has been discussed about ocular perfusion pressure and blood pressure and so on. I also include a 24-hour ambulatory BP measurement now, and I would consider a sleep study to exclude OSA, as Professor Kirti Singh pointed out. Various tests to do and determine the ocular blood flow in an eye, the retrobulbar as well as the retinal and choroidal circulation and so on. So many methods, so many flaws and limitations. And despite all these flaws and limitations, we have been continuing to progress with these kind of studies. The most popular, well-published literature data available is on color Doppler imaging. We don't have much data on the other technologies, at least in India. OCT angio has become available and we are starting to use it, but it's early days. We don't have normative data and so on. So this has been the one which I've been using quite often, and this is in association with a radiologist in Chennai. And the data which you get is on the screen there. You get the readings of the PSV, EDV, and the resistive index from the vasculature at the back of the eye, the ophthalmic artery, the CRA, as well as the veins and so on. And blood flow deficits can be picked up in this vasculature behind the eye very easily with the technology which I have been showing you. I'm going to show you a short video clip of what the initial method of doing the color Doppler imaging. This is in association with Professor Alan Harris, who was with us for some time and who taught us the method of doing the This is Professor Venkat Sai, who's a lead authority on this subject and this technology for the last about 10 years. I think Dr. Chalni did mention about angle correction. I'm just showing you very briefly how the test is being as the patient in supine position. Make sure the patient has taken adequate rest. The blood pressure should be adequately controlled. Patient should have taken medication. Not to apply pressure on the globe. Patient must be relaxed before the test and so on. So many plus and points to be noted. And you notice that even a pillow is not used in many of our patients because the test is sensitive to even the positioning of the head of the patient. Now you can see the probe being placed very gently. It does require a certain amount of skill and there is a learning curve involved. And it's not everybody who can do the test repeatably every time. This is Professor Harris, who was actually with us and showing us the method. I'm just going to forward that a little bit. That's a reversal of flow in one particular patient we had seen. So yeah, I'll just move on in the interest of time. Some examples of what normal looks like in the ophthalmic artery, the central retinal artery, and the vein, of course, as he was describing. And we recently published a normative data for South India in our South Indian Tamil Nadu journal about the various values in different age groups of the PSV, EDV, and the RI for different vasculature. This was published very recently in our Tamil Nadu journal. And a few case examples of what can happen when you're doing this kind of, it takes a lot of practice to actually pick up these changes. Loss of biphasic pattern, decreased flow, and abnormal CDA showing loss of the biphasic pattern, the peak systolic velocity blunting, and a sharp peak systolic velocity. So many examples. As you keep doing, you will understand and pick up these changes in patients with different vascular abnormalities, including glaucoma. It's not that you see it only in glaucoma. This is an example of reduced diastolic flow in the PCA, the left side. A recent study which we have published, and in fact in the last AOS, the paper was presented and happened to get the best paper of the session award in 2020. This was a study in which we included and randomized patients to timolol and dazolamide, and baseline CDA was done. CDA again after 12 weeks, baseline CDA with and without payment, two different drugs. And after say 12 weeks, we look at the CDI. In brief, I can tell you the study results, which is yet to be published. And the ophthalmic artery, we did not find any change. In the central retinal artery also, there was no significant change in the resistive index, but a significant change in the resistive index was noted in the short posterior ciliary vessels. Our radiologists actually managed to look at both the temporal and the nasal vessels, and the significant change in the SPCA was actually noted in the temporal vessels. So the RA in brief was not statistically significant with both drugs in the CRA and the OA, but a significant reduction in the resistive index is observed in patients with dazolamide in the temporal short posterior ciliary vessels. A slight increase in the peak systolic velocity and diastolic velocity has also been observed. So how does dazolamide actually do this? The theory of the dazolamide increasing ocular blood flow is said to be a vasorelaxing effect. Previous studies have pointed out the vasorelaxing effect of the CA inhibitors by extracellular acidosis acting on the pericytes and specifically inhibiting the CA inhibitor enzyme, coenzyme 5, isoenzyme 5. If we look at various publications on the same subject, you'll notice that Alan Harris is the authority on the subject, and various other authors as well, and different technologies have been used to look at the blood flow. Many studies have shown an increase in the blood flow in different technologies using with the use of dazolamide. Some studies have shown no effect. It's either no effect or an increase. And this is the status of the publication using color Doppler imaging as well as other technologies. 72% of the published studies on dazolamide have documented an increase in the blood flow. This is for the skeptics who believe that the drug doesn't work. Of course, nobody can be very sure of what the meaning of the increased ocular blood flow on glaucoma perfusion, change in perimetry, field loss, and so on. A lot of things are left to speculation. But this is the current data available in published literature. So take-home messages for the practicing clinician: definitely consider ocular blood flow studies or whatever you have access to and whatever you're familiar with in NTG patients. Unexplained progression is a reason for doing the ocular blood flow study. A vascular etiology can be suspected as a cause for glaucoma in many patients. CDA is an established tool with adequate published evidence for ocular blood flow assessment, but definitely has limitations. This is a study group which we started off with, and we are continuing to work with many of them. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Murli. That was indeed a wonderful presentation and gave so many insights. So that was nice that routinely you do ocular blood flow and Doppler study in all NTG patients. Can we have any more indications of this modality as to be incorporated in our clinical practices?
Yeah, I think, basically, it's a difficult test to do in terms of logistics. The problem with I think you didn't mention many of the things related to the color Doppler imaging in our ophthalmic practice. So the machine actually comes now under the PCNDT Act. You're all aware of that, and especially in states like Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu. The machine, the technology, the machine, for you to use it, you have to be a certified radiologist. And if you're an ophthalmologist who's actually doing the test, it's actually illegal. You need to be certified for 6 months and undergo a course, and then only you can start even touching the machine. If you have that machine in your hospital, it means that you must be certified under the PCNDT Act. Your hospital must indicate what are all the patients you're using it for, and all the names and numbers and indication, everything. So it's a big logistic problem as far as ophthalmology is concerned. which is why we refer it to a standalone center. That is one. The second thing is, after certification, the radiologist has to do repeatable tests. We found that suppose one radiologist does it and somebody else is actually his assistant or associate or his colleagues do it, we don't get the same results. It's like our surgical techniques. So I think the same radiologist doing it for the same patient in a follow-up study is extremely important. Otherwise, you don't get the repeatability. So the repeatability and identifying the posterior ciliary vessels is definitely an art and a skill. And if you try it yourself for the first time, you will find you can't even notice it. You won't even note the posterior ciliary vessels. And our radiologist, Professor Venkat Sai, used to do it. He will get it first shot every time. So I think that's a so-called skill and ability of a radiologist to pick up the posterior ciliary vessels. So many things are important as far as the testing is concerned. And with regards to indication of doing the test itself, so we don't refer out everybody for these reasons. We need to send it to a radiologist. We need to send it to a different center. We need to send it to the same radiologist for before and after and so on. With all these logistic difficulties, an increase in the cost, and sometimes patients may turn around and ask you, is this definitely going to change my treatment? Is this going to affect the management? So we don't really have definite answers to all these questions. So we therefore do it selectively. I do it in all NTG patients where we have doubts about the vascularity progressing despite everything else we do and so on. And of course, in certain diabetics with vascular occlusions, vein occlusions, artery occlusions, wherever you suspect a vascular episode and you feel the need to look at the retrobulbar flow, for those non-glaucoma patients also you can do it.